The wind howled over the muddy riverbank as Officer Ryan McConnell dropped to one knee, eyes locked on the impossible sight before him. A small lion cub, soaked, shivering, and clinging desperately to a jagged tree branch, was fighting for its life in the middle of a roaring current. The water was high, wild from the recent storm, and the sky above boiled with gray clouds. The cub's paws were slipping. The branch wouldn't hold for long. "Hang on, little guy," Ryan shouted, his voice nearly drowned by the river's thunder. He looked around frantically, no backup, no rope, no time. The cub's wide, terrified eyes met his for a brief second. There was something hauntingly human in the way the animal looked at him, as if it understood what was at stake. Ryan's heart punched against his chest. He didn't know why, but something deep inside told him. This wasn't just a rescue. This meant something. The water surged again, pulling the cub deeper. Ryan could hear the dispatcher's voice crackling through his shoulder radio, asking for his status. He ignored it. None of that mattered now. The river had taken lives before. He knew it well. Just 2 years ago, a young girl had been swept away not far from here. That memory, still raw, flashed in his mind. He clenched his fists. Not this time. Without another thought, Ryan ripped off his utility belt and ran straight into the river. The cold hit him like a wall. The current grabbed his legs, threatening to pull him under. But he pushed forward, teeth clenched, arms driving through the water. The cub let out a weak, wheezing cry. Ryan reached just inches too short. Then, with a final lunge, he grabbed hold of the cub's front leg and yanked him to his chest. The cub was lighter than expected but limp, his eyes fluttering shut from exhaustion. Ryan turned, fighting the current with every ounce of strength left in his body. The muddy bank seemed farther now. Every step was a battle. But finally, soaked and gasping, he collapsed onto the shore with the cub still clutched to his chest. For a long second, neither moved. Then the cub coughed, a tiny, choked sound, and blinked up at him. Ryan stared down, his breath catching. The eyes looking back at him were calm now, grateful, and something else he couldn't quite explain. He'd saved the cub, but deep down he knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The rain had stopped by the time Ryan placed the soaked cub inside the back seat of his patrol car, carefully wrapping him in a wool blanket from the trunk. The little lion trembled, not just from the cold, but from something deeper: fear, confusion, maybe even grief. Ryan sat beside him for a moment, the door open, his boots still dripping river water onto the dirt. He couldn't stop staring. There was something about the cub's eyes, dark, heavy, watching him as if trying to remember something long forgotten. Back at the small-town precinct, Ryan cleared out the break room, turned the heater up, and laid the cub on a folded comforter. Dr. Emily Foster, the county's only vet trained to deal with exotic animals, was already on her way. Ryan sat nearby, arms resting on his knees, watching the cub breathe. Every rise and fall of its chest felt like a small victory. But in the quiet of that room, something began to ache inside him. An old, buried ache he hadn't felt in years. He was only 10 when he lost Claire, his little sister. She'd been curious, adventurous, always chasing butterflies or frogs near the river behind their house. The day she slipped on the rocks and disappeared beneath the water still haunted him. Her laugh, her muddy shoes, the way she used to hum when scared. It all came rushing back now, triggered by the soft, struggling breath of a creature that had nearly shared her fate. The door creaked open. Sheriff Howard Gibbons stepped inside, a skeptical look on his weathered face. "You jumped in after a wild animal, Ryan? What were you thinking?" His voice was calm but edged with disapproval. Ryan stood slowly. "I didn't have time to think. He would have died." The sheriff looked down at the cub, now asleep, then back at Ryan. "This isn't our jurisdiction. You should have called Fish and Wildlife." Ryan didn't respond. He knew the rules. He also knew that something about this felt different. He wasn't just acting on instinct. He felt pulled to that moment on the river, like it was meant to happen. "Just let me keep him here for tonight," Ryan said. Until the vet sees him. The sheriff sighed but nodded once before walking out. Ryan turned back to the cub, now curled into the blanket like a scared child. He reached out and gently stroked the cub's head. "I don't know where you came from," he whispered, "but I swear to God, I'm not letting anything else slip away." The cub didn't move, but in the silence that followed, Ryan could almost hear it. The hum, just like Claire used to make. Faint, familiar, and it chilled him to the bone. By morning, Leo, because that's what Ryan had started calling him, was more alert. Still weak, but watching everything. Dr. Emily Foster arrived early, stepping into the precinct with her vet bag and her usual air of calm confidence. She knelt beside the cub, her fingers gentle and practiced. "This isn't a zoo animal," she said softly. "He was born wild, but he's been around humans. A lot. He doesn't flinch at touch. That's not normal." She looked up at Ryan, brows drawn tight. "Where did you say you found him?" Ryan hesitated. "The river, about 3 miles outside town. No signs of anyone else nearby. Just him, and a broken crate half-submerged on the bank." Emily's expression darkened. She stood and glanced out the window as if expecting someone to appear out of the fog. "That sounds like transport. Illegal transport." She turned back to Ryan, her voice lower. "You know what that means, right?" Ryan nodded. "Trafficking." The word tasted bitter in his mouth. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the world was still wet from the storm, and inside, a storm of its own was brewing. Emily checked Leo's pulse again, then opened her kit. "If someone was moving exotic animals through here, we need to report it to Wildlife Services. Now." But Ryan hesitated. Something in his gut tightened. "What if they come looking for him?" he asked. "What if he's marked?" Emily looked at him, surprised by the weight in his voice. "Ryan, it's a lion cub. He's not a lost dog." But Ryan wasn't thinking about protocol anymore. He was thinking about the way Leo had clung to him. The way those dark eyes had stared into his as if they'd met before. And more than anything, he was thinking about that soft hum he thought he'd heard the night before. A sound he hadn't heard since Claire died. His hands trembled. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. Something deeper was unfolding. Later that afternoon, Sheriff Gibbons called Ryan into his office. A report had come through. A known poacher named Zeke Dalton was suspected of moving exotic animals through the Pacific Northwest. A roadblock near the southern interstate had found empty cages, big enough for lions. "I need to know if you're keeping that cub safe," Gibbons said. "Because if Dalton finds out what you have, he's coming." Ryan nodded, jaw clenched. "He won't take him." As he walked out of the office, Leo was waiting by the break room door, eyes locked on him. Still small, still fragile, but something about the way he stood, chest lifted, ears twitching, made Ryan pause. This wasn't over. Not even close. That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. Every creak in the old precinct building felt louder. Every gust of wind outside sounded like a vehicle pulling up. He had moved Leo into the old evidence room. Small, quiet, and windowless. But it still didn't feel safe. The cub slept curled up on a blanket, his breathing steady, but Ryan stayed in the hallway, one hand on his holstered weapon, eyes fixed on the shadows. By sunrise, reports started to trickle in. A nearby farm found tire tracks leading into the woods behind their property. Another call came from a gas station down the highway. A man fitting Zeke Dalton's description had stopped for fuel, paid in cash, and left without a word. Sheriff Gibbons was already on alert, but Ryan knew something the others didn't. Zeke wasn't just passing through. He was circling, watching, waiting. Emily returned with a small scanner. She waved it gently over Leo's neck. A soft beep, a chip. "He's tagged," she whispered. Ryan stared at the numbers on the screen, then at Leo, who looked up at them as if sensing the tension. "It's a private registry," she said. "Probably black market. This isn't just some random poaching. He was being transported somewhere specific." Ryan's stomach turned. That meant someone out there wanted Leo back. Badly. Later, While patrolling a back road near the river, Ryan stopped his cruiser. Something felt wrong. He stepped out and scanned the treeline. There, far off but visible, was a glint, a reflection, a camera lens. Then it was gone. He ran toward the spot, but found nothing. No prints, no gear. Just disturbed brush and cigarette ash. Someone had been there, watching him. He returned to the precinct shaken. Gibbons could see it in his eyes. "They're already here, aren't they?" the sheriff asked. Ryan nodded slowly. "They're not just after the cub. They're tracking me now too." The sheriff exhaled deeply. "You're too close to this, Ryan. You're making it personal." But Ryan didn't answer, because it was personal. Leo had become more than a rescue. He was tied to something in Ryan's past. Something he still couldn't explain. That night, just before locking up, Ryan sat beside Leo and whispered, "They won't get you. I don't care what it takes." Leo pressed his head gently against Ryan's leg. And somewhere outside, in the dark beyond the fence, 2 headlights blinked out silently, like eyes closing, watching, waiting. Ryan hadn't visited his mother in months, maybe longer. The old house sat at the edge of town, surrounded by tall oaks and silence. He drove there with Leo asleep in the back seat, bundled in a soft flannel blanket. He didn't know exactly what had pushed him to go. Only that something about the cub, the river, and the feeling in his chest wouldn't let him rest. He needed answers, and somehow, he knew they weren't going to come from police reports or vet scans. Marianne McConnell was already waiting on the porch when he arrived, her cardigan wrapped tight against the morning chill. Her eyes, pale and cautious, softened slightly at the sight of her son. "Is that a lion?" she asked, blinking. Ryan half smiled. Long story. He carried Leo inside and placed him gently on an old quilt by the fireplace. The cub looked around quietly, but didn't flinch, almost as if he recognized the place. They sat in the living room for a while without speaking. The smell of coffee and old wood filled the space, and Ryan felt the weight of memory pressing in from every corner. Photos of Claire still lined the mantel. Her favorite doll sat untouched on a shelf. After a long silence, Ryan finally said, "Do you remember the summer before Claire died? The one where she kept saying she was seeing things in the woods?" Marianne stiffened. She was just a child, always had an imagination. But Ryan shook his head slowly. "No." She said it felt like something was calling to her. Something wild. Something that sang. Marianne's hands trembled slightly as she held her coffee. "You think that cub means something, don't you?" she asked. Ryan looked over at Leo, who had curled up by the fire. "I don't know," he whispered. "But when I look at him, I feel her. Like I failed her and somehow I was given one more chance." His mother stared into the flames, her voice barely audible. "Claire had a birthmark, shaped like a crescent moon. You remember?" Ryan nodded. "Yeah, on her shoulder." Marianne turned her eyes to him. "So why?" she said, her voice tight. "Does that animal have the same mark on his side?" Ryan's breath caught. He stood and walked to Leo, gently shifting the cub's fur. And there it was, barely visible under the light, but unmistakable. A crescent shape, like a scar left behind by something more than teeth or claws. His knees weakened. The room spun. And for the first time in years, he felt something close to fear. But not fear of the outside world. Fear of what he'd forgotten. Ryan didn't remember falling asleep, only waking up on the living room floor as the morning light crept through the curtains. The fire had gone out. Leo was still asleep by the hearth, chest rising slowly. The faint scar on his side now burned into Ryan's memory. That mark wasn't coincidence. It wasn't just biology. It was a message, and he didn't know if he was ready to understand it. Marianne was in the kitchen, humming softly, a tune Ryan hadn't heard in decades. It was the same lullaby Claire used to hum when she was afraid. He leaned against the doorway, watching his mother as if seeing her for the first time. "Did Claire ever talk to you about animals?" he asked. She paused, then nodded. She said she dreamed of one, a lion, small, golden, with dark eyes. She called him Leo. Ryan swallowed hard. The name hadn't come to him by chance. It had lived somewhere inside him, buried under years of guilt and silence. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" he asked, voice rough. Marianne looked tired, older than he remembered. "Because it hurt too much. And because part of me always believed you'd find him one day." Her words hung in the air like smoke. Impossible. And yet, Ryan couldn't deny what he felt every time he looked into Leo's eyes. There was recognition, memory, a presence too old for such a young creature. Later that day, Emily called with news that froze the blood in Ryan's veins. Zeke Dalton was seen heading north again. "There's a rumor he's tracking something. Someone sold him information." Ryan's heart sank. Someone had talked. Maybe a witness, maybe a careless call. He didn't know. But the net was tightening. And if Zeke got his hands on Leo, Ryan knew he wouldn't stop until the cub was gone. Or worse. Back at the precinct, Ryan checked the security cameras. Nothing unusual until he rewound footage from the night before. At 2:13 a.m., a figure stood just beyond the fence line. Tall, still, watching, then gone. He zoomed in, freezing the image. A glint of a rifle scope. A black jacket. It was Zeke. Ryan's pulse pounded in his ears. This wasn't just a hunt anymore. It was a war. That night, Ryan packed Leo into his truck, heart pounding. "We can't stay here," he whispered. As he pulled out onto the highway, rain began to fall again. Just like the night he found Leo. The wind howled against the windshield, and for a second, Ryan swore he heard it again. A hum. Claire's hum. Faint inside the cab. Or maybe not. Maybe Leo was humming now. Maybe he'd always been. The highway was slick with rain, the wipers struggling to keep up as Ryan gripped the steering wheel tighter than he realized. Leo lay curled in the passenger seat, quiet but wide-eyed, occasionally glancing at Ryan as if trying to read his thoughts. They hadn't spoken a word since leaving town. What was there to say? Ryan was running not just from Zeke Dalton, but from questions he wasn't ready to answer. Questions about fate, about loss, about why this cub felt so much like a second chance at something he thought was gone forever. He took the back roads, avoiding main highways and populated areas. A few hours later, they stopped at an old ranger cabin deep in the Umpqua forest, abandoned but still standing. Ryan used to come here with his father as a boy. He remembered fishing trips, campfires, and the sound of owls at night. The place was untouched by time, and for a moment it felt safe. But that feeling vanished quickly. He knew Zeke wouldn't stop, and now Ryan had to decide how far he was willing to go to keep Leo out of his hands. Inside the cabin, Leo paced restlessly, sniffing the air, ears twitching at every sound. Ryan laid out supplies, water, canned food, a flashlight, and then sat on the floor exhausted. "You're not just some animal," he muttered, staring at the cub. "I don't know what you are, but I know you're not ordinary." Leo walked over and pressed his head gently against Ryan's chest. It wasn't just affection. It felt like comfort, like he understood. That night, Ryan dreamed of the river again. But this time, it wasn't Claire drowning, it was him. He was sinking, calling her name, and then she appeared above him, standing on the water, holding a small lion cub in her arms. She didn't speak. She just looked at him with those familiar blue eyes and whispered something he couldn't hear. When he woke up, Leo was sitting inches from his face, staring, tail still, watching him like a guardian. Before dawn, a single gunshot cracked through the trees. Ryan dove for his pistol, heart hammering. He peered through the cabin window, nothing but darkness. Another shot rang out, closer this time. Leo crouched low, a low growl rising in his throat. They were found. Zeke was here. Ryan grabbed the cub and his gear, kicking open the back door. The forest was thick, wet, and cold, but they had no choice. They ran. And this time, Ryan wasn't just running to protect Leo. He was running to protect everything he had left. The forest swallowed them whole. Branches tore at Ryan's jacket as he ran, clutching Leo against his chest. His breath came in sharp bursts, and every step felt heavier, the mud threatening to pull him down. Behind them, The sound of boots crushing wet leaves grew louder. Zeke Dalton was close, too close, and Ryan knew one thing for sure. He wouldn't stop until Leo was his. A shout echoed through the trees. "McConnell, you don't know what you're carrying." Zeke's voice was calm, almost amused, but it sent a chill down Ryan's spine. He ducked behind a fallen log, trying to quiet his breathing. Leo was shaking, pressed close, his small body warm but tense. Ryan looked into the cub's eyes. "We're gonna make it, I promise." But promises felt thin out here, where the trees seemed to close in like walls. Zeke was a hunter, skilled, ruthless, and patient. Ryan knew he wouldn't rush. He'd wait for the moment Ryan made a mistake. He'd wait for exhaustion to set in. And it was already happening. Ryan's legs ached. His vision blurred. But when he looked down at Leo, something inside him ignited again. A flicker of the same fire he'd lost the day Claire died. They reached a clearing by a steep drop, the kind of place Ryan remembered from childhood hikes. Dangerous, wild, unforgiving. With no time to turn back, Ryan crouched low behind a cluster of rocks, listening. Silence. Then, a branch snapped behind him. He spun around. Zeke stood at the tree line, rifle raised, face shadowed under a hood. "Step away from the cub," he said. "You don't know what that thing really is." Ryan stood slowly, shielding Leo with his body. "You think he's property? He's not." Zeke scoffed. "You think this is about money? That cub's worth more than cash. He's connected to something ancient. People pay fortunes to possess that kind of power." Ryan's grip tightened. "You're not taking him." Zeke took a step forward. "Then you better be ready to die out here." Before Zeke could Leo let out a deep, guttural growl. Not like a cub, but something older, primal. The sound rattled through the clearing, freezing both men. Ryan took the moment and lunged, tackling Zeke to the ground. The rifle fired into the air as the two wrestled, fists slamming against wet earth and bone. Zeke fought like a man possessed, but Ryan fought like a man with everything to lose. When it was over, Ryan stood, bruised and bloodied, Zeke unconscious beneath him. Leo sat nearby, chest heaving, eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. Ryan looked at him, heart racing. This wasn't just survival. It was destiny catching up. Morning broke slowly over the forest, filtering through the trees in soft, golden streaks. Ryan sat beside a tree, back aching, shirt torn, and knuckles raw. Zeke was restrained, unconscious, tied to a tree with the same zip ties he once used to catch poachers. The forest was quiet again, but Ryan knew the real storm had just passed. Something had shifted inside him, like a door cracking open after being locked for years. Leo lay curled against his leg, asleep but peaceful. There was no trace of the growl from the night before, no glow in his eyes, just a cub, tired and warm, breathing softly. And yet, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that Leo had protected him, that somehow Claire had. He reached down and gently stroked the cub's head. "Who are you really?" he whispered. The forest gave no answer, but inside he could feel something settling, some kind of knowing. Hours later, Sheriff Gibbons and a Wildlife Services team arrived by helicopter. Emily was with them. Her eyes widened when she saw Leo unharmed, and then narrowed when she saw Ryan, bruised, bloody, but standing. She ran to him, gripping his shoulders. "You're insane," she said, half crying, half laughing. He nodded slowly. "Probably," but in that moment he didn't care. He'd done what no one else would have dared. They sedated Zeke, loaded him into the chopper, and began processing evidence. One of the wildlife agents scanned Leo again, and this time the registry pinged. Emily read the screen and froze. "Ryan, this chip was registered 12 years ago, but not to a black market vendor. To a woman named Claire McConnell." Ryan's heart dropped. "That's not possible," he said. "Claire was a child. She died." Emily interrupted, her voice shaking. "Someone hacked this registry, modified it. Your sister's name is attached to the tag. That doesn't happen by accident." Ryan stumbled back. He remembered the night before Claire died. the way she had whispered about the lion in her dreams. The songs, the humming, the mark, everything began to swirl. Maybe she hadn't just imagined it. Maybe she had known something the world had forgotten. As the team prepared to take Leo into custody for observation, Ryan stepped in front of them. "No," he said firmly. "He stays with me." Gibbons looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "You earned that right." That night, back at the old house, Ryan laid Leo in front of the fireplace once more. The room was quiet, safe. Marian stood in the hallway, watching with tearful eyes. "He brought you back," she whispered. Ryan looked at her, then down at Leo. "No," he said. "He brought all of us back." Weeks passed. The forest healed. The storm faded into memory, and Zeke Dalton was locked away to face federal charges. His network collapsed with him. No more smuggling, no more shadows in the trees. Ryan returned to duty, but something fundamental inside him had changed. He no longer saw his badge as protection. He saw it as responsibility, not just to people, but to every living thing that couldn't speak for itself. Leo stayed with him through it all. Wildlife Services eventually ruled that, due to his unnatural early exposure to humans, the cub wasn't suited for release into the wild. But none of them could explain the bond, or the scar, or the way Leo would sit beside Ryan at the river's edge, completely still, like he was listening to something only he could hear. The humming never came again, not out loud, but Ryan could still feel it. A kind of peace he hadn't known since childhood. Emily helped design a sanctuary enclosure behind Ryan's house. Big enough for Leo to grow, safe enough to protect him from the world, and close enough that Ryan never had to say goodbye. "He's a bridge," she said once, watching Leo chase falling leaves. "Between your past and your future." Ryan just nodded, words not ready to form. But she was right. Leo wasn't just a second chance. He was closure and continuation in the same breath. Marian came by more often now. She brought old photo albums, stories, even a few of Claire's favorite childhood books. One afternoon, she handed Ryan a faded drawing from years ago. It showed a little girl holding hands with a lion cub under a tree. "She drew this 3 days before the accident," Marian said softly. Ryan traced the image with his thumb. It looked just like Leo. Same eyes, same mark, same quiet strength. One evening, Ryan sat by the fire with Leo at his feet, Emily beside him on the porch swing. The air was cool, the stars brighter than he remembered. "Do you ever wonder why it happened?" she asked. Ryan thought for a long time before answering. "Not anymore," he said. "It doesn't matter where he came from. What matters is that he's here. And so am I." The wind moved gently through the trees, and for a moment, Ryan closed his eyes and let it all settle. The grief, the mystery, the healing. Claire was gone, but her voice had never really left him. Not completely. Through Leo it still whispered, and this time he was finally ready to listen.